My name is Max Saron, and I'm an instructor at Polytechnic here in Regina. I'm also a business owner, have been for many years, and I also am the chair for the CWBi Association here in Regina. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about metallurgy. It's the intro to why we have metallurgy, why it exists, and why it's important to know. A couple things that are key about the purpose of understanding metallurgy is how it relates to your trade. Okay, one of the really important things to understand is the why. Okay, and lots of times you guys are going to take metallurgy in school. You're going to be studying it on the site. You're going to be learning it in different places. And one of the questions I hear from my students all the time is, why do we need to know this, or how is it relevant to what I'm going to be doing in the future in the steel trades? I guess we kind of skip over that. We kind of think about the test all the time. We're always trying to figure out, what do we need to know for the test, and what are the basics? What do we need to do just to pass at the end of the course? But I really feel deep down inside, and if you've ever taken a class with me or heard any of my talks before, that metallurgy is something that really separates tradespersons in terms of their skill level. A couple things that's important to know about metallurgy is that there's a few different ways to take it, all right? You could take it at a very basic level, and that's fine. If you take it at a basic level, that's good for pretty much whatever you're going to do in terms of building things or working with steel. If you are a laborer, or you're coming out onto the job site as a first year, or you're a hobbyist in your garage and you're working around your tools, or you're building things for your house, okay? You don't need to know much about metal or steel or the ores or any of that stuff that gets pretty complicated. Another thing that you could do at a basic level is get a job. You know, you can just understand that this is steel and this is how you work, cut it, weld it, tack it, drill it, whatever you're going to do. Now, like any trade, the better you understand your material, the better you're going to be at your craft, all right? So if you get to mid-level knowledge, you try to understand a little bit better what's happening with metallurgy, what's happening with the steel, what's happening with your components. What you're going to find is that you're going to start to understand things that are happening when they happen. So distortion, stretch out, bending, heating, combining certain metals, or how to weld certain metals, all those answers lie within metallurgy. Now, if you get to the higher levels, or you're really trying to master metallurgy, you're going to be looking at creating your own metals, forging, smelting. You're looking at possibly some blacksmithing or higher level fabrication, okay? To be a fabricator or a good fabricator, you should have a pretty good understanding of metallurgy. Also, to be a good welder at a high-end shop, or you want to get into the high-end work of welding, you also should have a pretty good understanding of metallurgy. The main reason why you need to have a higher level of understanding of metallurgy for those top-end jobs is because of your ability to problem solve, okay? When you understand metallurgy, you can problem solve. And I'm talking about pre-problem solving. Someone will say, can I do this, or can I do that, or how do we do this? How do we weld this, or can I weld this? If you have a good understanding of metallurgy, which I kind of think we all get as we stay in the trades longer, you'll be able to understand and give an answer. No, you can't do that, or yes, you can do that, but this might happen. Or if this does happen, this is how I solve it, okay? So that's kind of the why. Why do we need metallurgy? Well, because it makes you a better tradesperson. And that's what we're aiming to do. These videos that I'm going to be putting together for you guys is kind of trying to just make things relatable and understandable for everyday people, everyday welders that kind of have these questions. And you're going to see that I have down here askmax at CWBgroup.org. You guys can send me messages, send me emails, and also I'll put up my Insta later, and you guys can ask me stuff, and I'll answer you to the best of my ability. And if I can't, you know what? I'll reach out and I'll find those answers, because I guarantee you, if you have a question, someone else does. And, you know, the steel trades is a community. It's something that I stress a lot. We help each other, because at the end of the day, there's work for everybody, and we can really build the trade and hopefully get it out there. We need more welders. We need more people. We need good quality welders, all right? So the first part of understanding metallurgy will be understanding what is ore and how we get from ore to iron, okay? So we have this thing called ore, and we're trying to get to iron. So we can work with iron. Ore comes out of the ground, all right? Ore coming out of the ground is not great. It's a rock. There's not a lot you can do with it. At that point, it's something that there'll be some characteristics that you can understand or you might see and be like, oh, that's ore, right? A rust, oxidization, right? That's something you can see, something orangey. I was working in Africa at some gold mines, and there's whole areas where the ground is red, right? All the dirt is red. And I asked one of the mineralogists there, and he told me about how the ground has such a high level of ore or iron that it oxidizes, giving the whole earth a hue of orange. Okay, that's really interesting because certain plants love that. Iron is something that exists in all our world. You know, Fe. This is iron. We call it ferrous, ferrous metals. Anything that's ferrous has a base in iron. Well, before we can work with iron, we have to have a basic understanding of how we get it. And why? Well, because maybe you're going to want to make it someday. When I talk about blacksmiths, well, you're going to want to mix things. You're going to want to figure out how to make things. And understanding the chemistry of what's happening is pretty important, all right? So when we dig up ore, we got a few types. We got hematite, we got magnetite, we got limonite. Now there's going to be some slides coming up during the presentation with pictures, hopefully better writing than I have, okay? Now at the end of the day, all of these are pretty important. Now, hematite is, let's see if I got this right. I got Fe3O4. Magnetite, I got Fe2O3. And limonite, I got FeO plus H2O. So right away, you're going to notice some things that are happening here. Okay, we got iron, we got oxygen. We got iron, we got oxygen. We got iron, we got oxygen. Okay, and then here we have water. Okay, so limonite's kind of almost looks like a slimy, orangey red stone, usually occurring near riverbeds or water sources, hence its saturation of water. Now, in the world of iron or welding or any type of steel work, we have a common enemy. Okay, that common enemy is oxygen. Now, you're going to see that we have oxygen in some variation in every single one of these elements. Okay, now these are just rocks we're digging out of the ground. If we want to build something, or if we want to have a workable material, what we want to do is we want to get the iron out, and we want to get rid of that oxygen. Now, getting rid of the oxygen is a battle that exists from step one to the final product of all welding. When you're talking about porosity, you're talking about inclusions, you're talking about issues with heat, you're talking about gas mixtures in TIG and MIG, you're talking about all different types of situations of the hydrogen inclusions. Hydrogen comes from water, which is generally attached to oxygen. Oxygen's kind of always a culprit that's floating around, that's getting in the way. Now, oxygen has a very neat attribute, is that it loves combining with things. It's got a chemical attraction to many elements, most elements. And when it combines to elements, it oxidizes. Now, oxidization is a chemical process. And when chemicals process, they create energy, use energy, dissipate energy. Energy gets passed back and forth. So when we want to separate this, it's called reduction. All right? Now, reduction is basically just the splitting of chemicals into its base forms. So let's say you got Jello and you make Jello. Okay, you got Jello, you got water, you got the Jello compound, you mix it up, you put it in the fridge, you make Jello. And someone says to you, no, I want that separated again. Well, how would you do that? How would you get the water out of the Jello now? And that's something that's happening here. We got all these ores that they've been building for billions of years. And now we're looking at separating them. Okay, you're going to say, well, you know what? Heat it up, right? There's a couple things we know about the fire triangle. We got a heat source, we got fuel, and we got oxygen, right? You need oxygen. Well, this triangle is going to come up lots of times in our conversations going forward, because kind of everything breaks down into triangles. So I got a heat source, I could have a fire, right? I got a fuel, well, I'm going to put this ore in my fuel, and I'm going to add oxygen to try to burn it or melt it. And what's going to happen is that I can get some breakdown, but it's not going to happen really well, okay? Now, there's a few reasons why that doesn't happen well. First of all, if I got a fire, here's my fire, my camping fire outside. If I blow on it, I'm adding oxygen, 21% oxygen in our environment. I blow on it, I try to increase the oxygen input, and when I do that, what happens? The fire gets bigger. Well, bigger fires attract oxygen. So in my process of trying to burn out the oxygen, I'm basically adding more oxygen, right? So that's a problem. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up going just in a big cycle here. I'm going to go round and around and around, and I'm going to keep getting oxygen-filled iron, some type of Fe product with a lot of O2s or O's or O3s or O4s or whatever it is. Okay, so that's not going to really work. So when I'm looking at this and I say, okay, I need to reduce this. Let's get some reduction going on. How am I going to reduce this rock, right? This is my ore to iron. Here's my ingot. Okay, there's my iron, my Fe. Okay, so we know we got to get rid of the oxygen. Okay, now there's a lot of other things in that ore. It's not like a perfect rock. There's going to be, you know, rock stuff that's in nature. We're going to have hydrogen, we're going to have calcium, phosphates, sulfurs, other minerals. We're going to have all sorts of things that happen. Okay, well, in order to separate this, we're going to need a couple things. First of all, we're going to need heat. Now, we saw earlier that if I just burn stuff, I'm going to draw oxygen in. So what I need to do is I need to create a heat source that has no oxygen. Okay, so that's the first step. So how do we do that? Well, way back in the day when they first started working with ores, they found that, okay, let's use coal. Okay, we got coal. So coal is the byproduct of peat, which is a byproduct of plants. So what is coal? Coal is a naturally burning substance, a rock that comes out of the ground that's made from old swamplands or areas with heavy ground growth that then got buried and pressurized over millions of years. Okay, so our end product is basically you take 1 million plants and you cram them into a small entity, and it's got all that energy of millions of years of life waiting to come out. All right, so just like oil is a byproduct of animal matter, coal is a byproduct of plant matter. Okay, now that coal will burn much better than, say, wood, because wood is the energy of, say, 20 years of life, while coal is the energy of 20 million years of life. So way more heat, way more cleaner burning energy, but still that oxygen wants to get in. Now it's been squeezed out, it's underground, pressure, time, it's got way less oxygen, but still some, okay? So now I want to get that even cleaner, and this is what we do. What we do is we compress it and we heat it. So a good example of this is your barbecue. If you guys have ever had a barbecue outside and you buy charcoal, charcoal is very similar to coal, except we make it. So it's kind of like instant, right? So you take wood, you pressurize it, and you heat it up, and it makes your charcoal briquettes, okay? So it's charred coal, okay? So charcoal, when you're cooking with that on a fire, you don't just throw the steaks on it right away. You don't just light the charcoal, oh, it's lit, throw the steaks on. That's never the right temperature, right? When's the best time? When is the best time to cook that steak? Well, the best time is when the edges start to turn white, right? Here's your charcoal, and it starts getting gray around the outside, right? And you start getting that nice hot center. Now, at that point, you are burning the charcoal cleanly. It's most clean cycle. You're getting the most energy out of it. Well, when we compress the coal and we heat it up, we end up with a cleaner burning source, kind of like that white-edged charcoal brick. Well, the coal, when compressed and heated, you get all the oxygen out, like almost all of it. Like nothing's ever perfect. Nothing's ever 100%, but you're damn close, okay? And what you end up is a thing called coke, okay? Now, there's a lot of jokes in the classroom I'd crack about this right now, but, you know, we're online, so we're trying to do this right. So what we have when we say we're going to add coke to a mixture, what we have here is fuel. This is our fuel, okay? This is our heat source. And this is going to be a clean burning, low oxygen heat source. The lowest oxygen heat source we've been able to find, okay? So that's step one. Remember we were talking about the triangle, we got heat, we got fuel, and we got oxygen. All right, now we got coke. So let's put that up here on the list. I got my ore, my little shopping list. I got my coke. And now, you know what? I can burn that and things are going to start to reduce. I can start to separate things out. Now, there's something else that's very important in the welding world that we use all the time, and that's something to deoxidize or to pull materials out or for separating. Often we call it slag, right? Almost every process will have some version of slag. Silicon islands will have some type of separation, some type of reduction within the weld itself. And why do we need that? Well, because the ore, we talked about it, it's got lots of stuff in it. Lots of stuff, right? We got the iron, we got the oxygen, but we talked about sulfurs, and we talked about magnesiums, and all these other things. Well, how do you get rid of those things? Okay, this is what we do. We look for something, some type of element, some item, okay, that loves to bond to other things, just cause, right? We talked about how oxygen loves to bond. It's got all these bonds that go all over the place, and oxygen just loves to grab onto things, which is why it's so prominent in our nature, in our ecosystem, because it's used by so many different things for so many different reasons because of its bonding abilities. Okay, well, what we're trying to do now is bond things out, not bond things in. So we try looking for other things that bond, and we know, and this is, I'm not going to get too deep into this, but we know that calcium loves to bond. Okay, calcium is also an element that loves bonding to things. So if we take calcium, what's another element? Well, we know carbon. Carbon's an interesting element in steel. Okay? Carbon is an interesting element in the universe, right? We are carbon-based life forms. So why? Well, carbon is a fuel. Carbon burns, okay? Carbon is also an element that can mix in really well, right? It mixes nicely. Yet it tends not to overcome anything. It doesn't migrate too much. It doesn't complicate too many elements, but it does burn. So carbon's a nice thing because it burns clean. Calcium likes to combine, and oxygen likes to join things together. Okay? So when I combine calcium, carbon, and oxygen, I get something called calcium carbonate. Okay, CaCO2. Okay? Now what is that? Well, the common term for that is limestone. And what is limestone? Well, limestone is seashells. Okay, so we talked about how coke is plant matter over millions of years compressed into this cool burning item. Well, limestone is seashells from the bottom of the seafloor, coral reefs, clams, oysters, all these things, lobsters, crayfish, anything with a hard shell, exoskeleton, that has died over millions of years, gets compressed on the bottom of the ocean and gets turned into a stone. And there's calcium from the shell, there's carbon from the life form, and there's oxygen that came from the ocean, the water, because it loves to combine, right? And I end up with this thing called limestone. So what we found when we burn limestone with other things is that the oxygen will burn off, the calcium maintains heat, okay, so that's the heat, and the calcium will not burn off, but combine with other things and then roll out, basically, creating a slag. Okay, so calcium is one of the prime first elements that we found that was a slag producer. Okay, so let's take what we got now. We got ore, we got coke, and we got limestone. Okay, so I got an Fe2O3, let's say, and then we got a heat source, so we add this to our heat source. So here's our fire, which is a very low O2, and then we add that to the CaCO2, which is limestone. And what starts to happen is this heats this up, knocks that out, okay? Calcium will go with all the junk in here and bubble out and form a slag, leaving behind Fe and C. Now I got iron, and I got a little bit of carbon. What do I have? I have metal, right? Just like that. So this isn't science, or I'm sorry, this is not magic, it's science, right? This is something that we can control. And when I talk about metallurgy, and when I talk about all my classes at Sask Poly, when I'm teaching or when I'm on my tours talking, one of the things I'll always say is that welding can be broken down to a very scientific level. There's a Professor Patricio Mendez up in Alberta at the Canadian Center for Joining. I mean, those guys are amazingly intelligent up there. You guys got to see them speak. If you ever get to go to CanWeld or FabTech or any of these things, you got to go. Because you see some people that really take this stuff to the next level of science, and it's beautiful. Now, I'm not as smart as those guys, but I like understanding what's happening. And I think that most people do. And sometimes it's just a little bit too complex. So what we're trying to just do here is very simple. We're cooking, we're baking, right? We're breaking things down. What we're doing is we just want to get the iron, we just want to have a little bit of carbon, and we want to get rid of the oxygen, and we want to have a slag. So when I'm doing all this, I'm reducing it down. Now, where is this done? Well, there's going to be a slide that comes up that's way better drawn than this, but this is a blast furnace. People always talk about, blast furnace, comes up on your IP. If you're in Canada, you're going to be taking the Red Seal exam. You got to know the blast furnace, right? Well, the blast furnace is just a mixing pot for this. Like, literally, this could be a pot in your backyard. I mean, it was for millions of years just guys with a fire in a yard, right? So all I'm doing is I'm throwing in coke, I'm throwing in limestone, I'm throwing in ore, I'm burning it. The froth comes to the top. Lots of times people call froth flotation. It's kind of the floating of the different elements rising with the calcium. That's a lighter element. The heavier ions will sink to the bottom, and on the way down, the irons will connect to some of the carbons just because they're there. We tap it off the bottom, and we get a little puddle here, and that's our pure iron ingot, well, sort of pure-ish iron ingot that now we can work with. Now this is caveman stuff. This is the Iron Age right here. Okay, this is the Iron Age. This is what we figured out when we first started working with iron. And this is just iron right out of the ground. Okay, now iron wasn't the first thing we figured out. We figured out gold first, we figured out bronze first, the lighter, lower melting elements. But when we finally figured out how to work it with iron was a change for all of humanity, for all of our civilization. Much stronger element, much more rigid, very workable, ductile, and malleable, right? Now, we got the blast furnace. We got our FEC with a little bit of O2 because you're never going to get rid of it all. We got Fe, we got a little bit of carbon, we got a little bit of oxygen floating around. Hopefully no oxygen, but it tends to creep in there, right? Now, when we do this first blast furnace, okay, run of iron, you're going to have about 3 to 4% carbon. Now, for the people that know anything about carbon or have studied anything about welding before, that's way too high. Okay, way too high. Normally, when you're looking at iron, if you get over 1.8, so let's say 2%, just round it up 2%, you're in the cast iron world. And cast iron's kind of like 2 to 4, okay? Now, on a clean burn, you're getting 3 to 4% carbon on this iron. Now, we know cast iron is brittle, it's rigid, it's not great for workability, it has not a lot of ductility or malleability to it, it tends to shatter and break, and it's not great under heat, okay? Now, cast iron has a lot more oxygen than this first run, okay? The first run of iron we call pig iron. And that's that 3 to 4%, okay? That 3 to 4% carbon in that first run of pig iron is way too hard, and it's not usable for, say, structural or forming or bending or for a lot of the steels we use now, which is the difference between iron and steel. Steel is not iron. Steel has iron. Okay, it's very important to know that. Now, when we get to this point, we have to start thinking about what are we going to do going forward. Okay, we have our pig iron. Okay, and we have too much carbon in it. Are we going to work with this? Yes. How do we work with this? Well, that's going to be the next episode of this. On the next episode, what we're going to try to do is we're going to break down how to take our pig iron and work it into steel, which is now the steel making process. We're going to talk about how to get into the alloys, how to mix things in. What things do we mix in? Why would I mix things in? Some seems counterproductive, some seems productive. Sometimes we're adding things in that were the very things we took out in the first place in this process. Why would we do that? Well, we're going to go over that. And also as a side note, pig iron. What's up with that? What's up with the name pig iron? Well, I don't know if you guys have seen any old-timey videos from the 30s or the 20s, but if you guys Google sand casting, you can kind of see what it is. Okay, sand casting is kind of a neat thing. They do it in lots of countries. You can do it in your backyard. Go buy some sand and you can go buy some iron and melt it down and do some sand casting. It's pretty neat. You're going to have to get it pretty hot because you got to get it liquid, so you're looking at like 2,000-3,000 degrees, but it is a thing. So back in the day, they would do their little backyard blast furnaces, right? They'd have the froth calcium carbide slag here at the top rising up. At the bottom, you pull out your iron, which is liquid iron at this point. And what they would do is that they would dig or make molds in the sand or later on into wood or other materials where they would pour the iron in liquid iron, and it would run out and fill these up, right? All these would get full. And liquid would just run in, run in, run in. They'd let it cool, then you could just pop these out of the sand, break those off, and you end up with little ingots. Now, the term pig iron, as stupid as this is, but it's a real thing, is that looked like little baby piggies, okay, feeding off the mom. So these were the little piggies getting fed from the main ingot ladle. So they called it pig iron because it looks like little piggies. I know it's stupid, but that's the way it is. So hopefully you learned something new. If you got any questions, just email askmax@cwbgroup.org. I'd like to thank CWB. They're working with me on this project. CWB Education, the Canadian Welding Bureau here in Canada. Hopefully we got lots of cool stuff coming forward. I'd like to thank Sask Polytech. Regina is where I work. Sask Polytech Welding Program in Saskatchewan is, I think, one of the best in the world. We have great stuff going on, great instructors, great equipment. We got top-notch systems, and we're producing some of the best welders in the world, as we see in this last couple of years with our World Skills competitors and other students hitting the markets and doing fantastic. So again, I'm Max Saran. Thank you for joining us, and I hope I see you at the next episode. Talk to you later.